Hi, I'm Sean from Action Retro, and welcome to my OnlyFans. In last week's video, we went through this beautiful behemoth of a Quadra 950, got Apple's AUX running on it, and maxed it out with a monstrous 256 megs of RAM, which is an unbelievable number for 1992 when most machines came with RAM in the single digits. We also modified the power supply with a nice silent Noctua fan, turning this notoriously noisy Mac into a whisper quiet machine. So if you haven't seen that episode, I'll put a link to it right here. Definitely start with that one because we're going to be building on the work we did there. Namely, I'm a little concerned that our silent fan mod isn't enough to keep up with the heat that this machine generates. And that's not good at all because we're going to use this machine as a server during VCF East, running our multiplayer circle mud that hopefully many of you can play on. So today, let's see if we can improve the laughably under-engineered cooling in this Quadra, and then we'll try and get our circle mud server up and running using some of your helpful comments from the last video. Oh, and we might also get a little weird with it. So stay tuned. And if you enjoy tinkering with toasty turbocharged towers from the early 90s, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. I have many more projects like this in the pipeline, and they're definitely worth sticking around for. So let's talk Quadra 950 cooling. Back in 1991, when this tower was first introduced with the Quadra 900, Apple wasn't exactly the king of keeping their machines cool. In fact, poor cooling was kind of a tradition for Apple. And during Steve Jobs' tenure in the 80s, Apple was infamous for not using any fans at all in their machines. For example, when the Apple III came out, the cooling was so unbelievably poor that Apple support's official remedy for a non-booting 3 was to hold it several inches above the table and drop it. And that reseated the chips that came loose from the motherboard that warped due to heat. Or at least that's how the Apple lore goes. If you ever had to drop your Apple III to fix it, let me know in the comments. But just take a look at the cooling setup inside this Quadra. For as hideously loud as this machine was, it only has one fan right here in the middle blowing out through the power supply. And it used to be this hideously loud fan, but I've swapped it out for this Noctua. So fortunately, the noise level is down, but the cooling problem persists. Because where is this fan actually supposed to be drawing air from? When this case is closed, it's basically just pumping the super hot air from around the processor back here, which itself is only cooled by a tiny heatsink, and it's blowing it over the already hot components in the power supply, and then out the back. No wonder these power supplies are so notorious for failure. I mean, the fan is literally facing a completely sealed and solid wall of plastic. The only real opening to the outside is here, the grate for the speaker in front, which is completely obstructed, obviously, by the speaker itself. Well, that and the gigantic 90s PC case panel gaps, which I'm sure wind up sucking in a fair amount of fresh air. You know, if they wanted a more precise build for this case, they could have gone to the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay, who now offers way more than just PCB prototyping. In fact, PCBWay now offers injection molding, sheet metal fabricating, CNC machining, and high-quality 3D printing in FDM, SLA, SLS, MJF, DMLS, and PolyJet, which is incredible, and I might actually be utilizing that very service for this Quadra 950's missing faceplate. So if you have any PCB or manufacturing needs, give PCBWay.com a try. So my idea today is to move this speaker somewhere else in the case and stick a big old fan there because check this out. The mounting holes on this speaker line up almost perfectly with the mounting holes on a 92mm fan. In fact, they're only about half a millimeter off on either side, which I think will be up to the tolerances of the flex of the plastic on the case here, so I think this fan will just screw straight into the front of the case. And this grate for the speaker here is actually perfect for a fan Just check out how big it is. All that space just for that super loud speaker. I think that's going to draw a lot of airflow in and really help out the cooling in this machine. So my initial thought was something like this. I designed this 3D printed mount to hold an 80mm fan kind of at an angle in here to blow up towards the processor. And a big reason for this was, well, I actually only had 80mm fans. I didn't have any bigger Noctuas on hand, and this works pretty well, and it's actually pretty quiet for being right up against the front of the machine. But then I decided to actually just pick up a 92mm fan, which does fit in here perfectly. Yeah, so if you look closely, you can see the screws are ever so slightly at kind of an inward angle, but more than within the tolerance of the plastic on the fan casing, and this thing is not going to vibrate or move anywhere. And then we can just hook it up to power. Alright, so the machine is powered up and I can hear that fan going. It's a little louder than I was hoping, but not too bad. Let's give it the good old scientific napkin test. Yeah, I'd say that's some pretty good airflow. Now, as far as this speaker goes, I'm actually not too sure what to do with it. There aren't really a lot of other holes in here that I could usurp to screw it in. In the front here, there is this Velcro strap for holding down cables, but that's not going to be enough to hold the speaker there. And I don't want to drill any holes in this beautiful and historical old machine. So for now, I think what I'm going to do is just double side tape it maybe right here, because this speaker is darn loud, even as old as it is, so we'll be able to hear it just fine, even if it's kind of muffled by the case. There we go, that speaker is not going anywhere, at least not for the next decade or so. Okay, so the last mod that I'd like to do today is, yeah, it's kind of silly, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and just indulge me. If it's terrible, we'll take it out later. But I want to take out this caddy loading CD-ROM, which I don't think works, and replace it with that goofy 5¼ inch fan controller. Yeah, so unfortunately, I just don't think this thing works because, again, it was plugged into power and pushing this button just gave no result. So maybe I'll take this apart later and see if I can fix it or toss it in a different machine and see if maybe it does work, because it is certainly a cool looking CD-ROM. Okay, let's take a closer look at this silly thing because I'm actually not entirely sure how it works. From the pictures I saw online, the front of it lights up with a bunch of stuff that looks like a 1990s car stereo, which is kind of what attracted me to it. And it has these 3 buttons for mode, alarm C/F, whatever that means, and speed, which I'm hoping will just let me adjust the speed of the fan on the fly in case it's too noisy when I'm just tinkering around with it, and then I can ramp it all the way up if we're doing something intensive like compiling or running it as a server. Now it came in this box here, direct from Hong Kong. And it came with some instructions. That side is in Chinese. Is there English? Yes. Alright, so I'm sure this would tell me how to use it. Yeah, there's a clock. There's a lot of stuff in here about setting the clock. Oh yeah, and it has an alarm temperature, which is pretty cool. So we can set the alarm temperature by pressing mode for 2 seconds and then pressing mode 7 times. I wonder where the sensor is. It says there's a sensor. Where is it going to read the temperature from? I mean, it'd be nice if there was like a temperature probe that I could put down near the processor, and I actually think there is. Yeah, there's a bunch of cool stuff in here. So these are all the fan connections. It has a connector for the hard drive LED, so maybe we'll see if we can connect that to the SCSI to SD. And then it looks like this has the temperature probes. It has one for the CPU, one for the hard drive, and one just for sys. That's a lot cooler than I thought it would be. But I don't know if this is going to be long enough to reach all the way across the machine. Let's install it and find out. Okay, so I guess let's just slot this in here. Okay, I'm actually going to just take this cage out. And let's see how this is going to fit in there. Yeah, that way we can screw it in from both sides because there's only actually 2 screw holes to fit it. So I've screwed this in on both sides, and yeah, this definitely looks like the cheap stereo head unit that I had in my beat-up Ford Mustang in high school. Alright, so it's installed, it's screwed in, and it's a bit more inset in the case than I was expecting. But that's okay because we have a 3D printer, and someone else has made these Quadra 900-950 front bezel brackets. It's actually supposed to be like that, but my 3D printer isn't big enough, so I had to print it in 2 halves. So I think what I'm going to do is modify this bracket to better enclose this space here, and then send it off to PCBWay to have it 3D printed. But yeah, it's going to look a little something like that. Not too shabby. Alright, so now we'll just have to give this thing power from this cable here and hide it away back here. And then we'll hook up our fan to the one that says sys, just because. And now let's see if we can get these temperature probes into reasonable locations. Fortunately, I have this big bag of little plastic clippy things, which are just little plastic clips with double-sided tape on the other side. So we'll take the one labeled hard drive, and that can live up here above the SCSI to SD. We'll take the CPU one and stick it right underneath the power supply here. Alright, so that's in there almost touching the heatsink. And then for system, I guess we'll just stick way over here where there's not a lot of airflow next to the cards. Alright, so it's all connected. Let's close the machine and see if it works and see if it can monitor our temperatures. Okay, so it's up and running, and I gotta say, I already love this thing. Just look at how awesome this looks. That's the most 90s display that I've ever seen, and it somehow both makes this machine look more futuristic and more 90s at the same time. Okay, so I hear the fan running, but let's give it the old napkin test. Yep, that's definitely on. Yeah, I absolutely love this. Look, the CPU temperature, that seems to be accurate. It is chugging up slowly as the machine is running. Let's see if we can push some of these buttons and figure out how this works without really reading the manual. So the mode button, yeah, changes the temperature monitor, CPU 31, the hard drive 29, system 30. Seems pretty good. The speed button doesn't seem to be doing anything, but perhaps it's not on the correct... I think I need to put this on system and then speed. Yeah, that works. So now it's dead silent. Still pulling in air. Yeah, that really does let me control the speed of the fan. Wow, I love it. I absolutely love it. Just for those 2 features alone, this is worth the $20 it was on Amazon. Okay, so we'll consult the instructions here. To change the CPU alarm temperature, press mode for 2 seconds, and then click mode 7 times. All right, let's see. Mode for 2 seconds. And then 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, now temperature is flashing at 60 C. So we're nowhere near that. Okay, so what? Do I have to go up all the way just to test this out? Okay, alarm temperature will be 40 for the CPU. And I doubt we're going to be able to hit that with all these fans going, so let's turn the fan down. And we'll watch the CPU temperature. And let's, yeah, I see it clicking up now, almost hitting 32. So let's run the compilation of CircleMud code and see if that cranks up the temperature enough to set the alarm off and see what it sounds like. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Sean, with this goofy, gimmicky drive bay gizmo, what about an optical drive? Well, don't you worry, I've got that covered. Feast your optics right here. That's right, we've got an external Apple CD300E. Now this gargantuan quad-speed external CD-ROM drive was sent in by Ron of Ron's Computer Videos fame, an excellent YouTube channel which I will link in the description below. Definitely check out Ron. But I cannot stress just how much of a huge tank this external SCSI CD-ROM drive is. I mean, just listen to this. Yeah, this thing is a solid metal case with a 4-speed Apple CD-ROM drive installed that connects via SCSI. Now, Ron sent in a couple notes with this, saying that in my recent Adventures to AUX video, he watched me connect that internal Apple 300i drive to the Quadra 700, which does not have an internal optical drive, and I just kind of had it dangling out the back of it. So he sent over this beautiful drive that he's actually restored and retro-brighted a bit. So thank you so much to all of my super smart developer viewers who gave me a bunch of C advice in the previous video's comments and actually helped me get a lot further than I was able to just on my own. Basically, it came down to different versions of C, and I won't pretend to understand everything that all of you told me, but basically it had to do with different versions of C, and I'm using a very, very old version of the GCC compiler, which doesn't support some new features that we take for granted these days, but now we compile almost all the way through, and every time it fails, I just go into the file that failed, usually just make that fix, and then it compiles. Okay, so I've spent an inordinate amount of time going through the code, recompiling, trying to fix the errors, and I think I finally have it in a state where it's going to compile. I think I've gotten everything because the stuff that I couldn't figure out, I just commented out and I figure we'll deal with it if the code doesn't work. So I've got some stuff commented out. Probably the mud will crash at some point if it does run, but let's compile it this time and see what we get. Oh my god, it worked. Look, it built it. There's the CircleMud executable for the server, along with all the ancillary utilities that also all built, although some of them, like Split and Sign, definitely have important parts of them commented out, so who knows if they're going to work, but let's try to run the CircleMud server. And nope. So it started to run, and then it got fatal error changing to data directory. Okay, I think actually we just need to run it from here. So one directory down, which has the library directories in this folder. Oh, so we do bin circle. There it is. Look at it. It's launching. It's firing up the server on port 4000. Let's see if it gets through all the way through this initialization. All right, it's alive. The server is fully booted up, and it did take several minutes to initialize, but I'm going to make a few tweaks and actually add some of the ASCII art that I created for the loading intro login screen. So I'll be right back and then let's log into the server. Okay, so the server is running. I've moved my art over and I did test it a bit and it works. I was able to connect to it locally and over the network. We'll just do a telnet into this machine's address. And there it is, good old Action Mud. And my name here is Hork, named after the sound that my cats like to make. And we're in. The mud is alive. Yeah, I can walk around. It's very responsive. I mean, this Quadra was literally built for this kind of thing. Now, in my testing, it did crash once. So it gave me some sort of memory error. I think some of the stuff that I commented out had to do with patching a memory leak. So I think I've reintroduced a memory leak to the server. However, it does run, and I had it running for over an hour before it crashed. So I think there is still some stuff I need to do to patch up whatever that is that I had to comment out. Okay, so I don't want to leave you hanging on what I'm sure is just a horrible beeping noise. So let's see if we can artificially increase the temperature next to that sensor and get this thing to beep. All right, here's the CPU sensor. Here's a candle lighter. Don't try this at home. There we go. So there we have it. This behemoth of a Quadra 950 is now totally cool in more ways than one. Running AUX 3.1, it's online, and it's running our CircleMud server. That is totally amazing. I'm so excited that we got to this point. And we are now pretty close to being able to use this computer as our centerpiece server at VCF East 2021 this year. So I really hope that some of you can make it out and see this machine in action, along with all of the other incredible exhibits that are always at VCF events. But if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more green tinted shenanigans like this, please subscribe down below, and thank you very much for watching. And a special thanks to Chris Allegretta, Tom, Stig124, Justin D. Morgan, Chris Calderon, and Greg from Hrutkane Mods, who are my highest tiered patrons, and all of my Patreon supporters for helping to make these videos possible.